So what you see on screen right now is a small reference photo of a ballet dancer that I used as reference on an illustration I did recently. This was my painting here. Well, part of the painting anyway, it's cropped in. And they're both quite low res. You're seeing these paintings, you're seeing this painting at 100% size, and you're seeing my reference at 100% size. And you notice that while I changed little things here and there, the thing that I did not change is the structure of the head. And while this painting has color, it's largely doing the same thing I did with the Asaro head before, and that is I'm using a lot of contrast between the light and dark values, and I'm letting the shapes be very clear. If you look at the light shape here revealing that front plane of the cheek, we learned all about that shape in chapter 1. If you look at that big shape of the brow, this is the planes of the head that face forward, the front planes of the box. Here's the maxilla, the upper lip area. Here's the top of the chin. All these areas face forward, they're gonna receive that direct light. And as a result, they're gonna pop out value-wise from the darker shadows. And the shadows, this entire area here, is mostly merged together in value. Now, I know it's not quite merged together. I'll talk about what I'm doing here, but just for the moment, just kind of follow me here as kind of the shadows make one overall connected shape. You can see that it's this one little shape that comes in like that. Now, there is an element that I've added to my understanding of the light in this painting, and this is what I want to introduce in this lesson, as well as color, and that is reflected light. Reflected light is light that comes in from this spotlight here. It comes in, I'll use a different color. It comes in, strikes the shoulder in this case, and it bounces back up. And when it bounces back up, it's going to illuminate the shadows. In this case, there's a lot of light coming down here, striking the shoulder region, and bouncing up into the underside of the head. So the underside plane, as well as some of the neck, is going to receive the most reflected light in this scene. Reflected light is also known as bounced light or ambient light or diffuse light. There's many names for it. So what I did in this painting, I could have simply painted it like this, like just keeping all the shadows together and, painted this general idea. And it would have worked. Like structurally, this would have worked. But just to make the painting a little bit more, to have the feeling that there is this strong light in the scene, I added this bounced light. And all you have to do, if I just switch this whole canvas to grayscale, the main trick with reflected light is to make sure that its value is still darker than the light. Remember the rule of painting, the singular rule of painting. Your shadows have to remain darker than your lights. So if we grab a color picker here and we sample the legitimate light, like this is where the light is directly hitting, somewhere in here, this value here, look at the shadow. Look how much darker it is. But switching back to color, you can see how it's almost fooling you into thinking that the bounce light is actually as light as the light. It's not though, I've just shown you that it's not. It just feels like it is because the shadows are so dark that when you lighten them, especially when you lighten them to the degree I did here, you'll get this heavy sense of illumination, and that's kind of what I was after here. Now, bounce light is ubiquitous in nature. It exists everywhere. It doesn't always exist in this quantity, but I want to show you it in this quantity just to show you how I deal with it. And then in later paintings, we'll tone it down a little bit. The thing I do to control my bounce light is I kind of pick one overall direction that is accountable for the most bounce light, and I focus my bounce light there. So in this case, it's the bounce coming up from her shoulder, illuminating the underside of the head. That is kind of like the master bounce light, and everything else is toned down. Like all the areas here are toned down, not getting as much bounce light. Now that's true of the reference as well, which is why stage lighting can often be quite good to study from, because stage lighting is very dramatic. It's like caricatured light, and a good lighting director on the stage is very good at mimicking nature but heightening its effect, which is kind of what's happening here. Now, on a color level, this is what I would classify as a cold light source, meaning the temperature of the light is somewhere in the blues, like the whitish blues. This is to me a cool color as compared to a stereotypical warm color, which might be in the yellows and reds. And as a result, when I'm in my light values, I'll be using colors that are cool. I'll be using blues like in this range, in the purple range. I might gray down some of my yellows to make it closer to gray. When things are closer to gray, they also become closer to other colors. I've talked about this on my YouTube channel a lot, and I'm going to try and keep this lesson centered around the head, not get it mired in color theory here. But I'm using colors that are in the cool range, in the light. In the shadow, I will use warmer colors, mostly because in the shadows, this is where the true flesh tones in this case are coming out, because that light is so dramatic, and it's such a dramatic cold light, it's such a bright light, that it's going to bully a lot of those colors to be, very cold colors. In the shadows, we're getting a little bit more of an honest look at what the flesh tone is, and because she has darker skin, I'll be using colors in this range in the shadow side. Now, for the bounced light, one thing that bounced light or reflected light can often bring with it is intense saturation. So when I'm in the bounce light colors, I'll really ramp up these reds, kind of accent the flesh tone colors that I've put down here, but ramp it up and, use a various selection of, pink reds and orange reds and purple reds, what have you. This is the kind of color scheme I'll be going for with the flesh tones. So be prepared for a dramatic reversal of process. I'm going to abandon my line drawing and paint actually how I normally paint, which is with big swatches of brushwork. I normally paint this way not because I don't want to draw. I'm still drawing even when you paint with big swatches like this. It's just that the drawing is happening with bigger shapes rather than with lines or with contours. So right now I'm just kind of blocking out where the head is going to go. You can kind of see a profile view coming in here. And I'm also keeping my brushwork flowing and colors mixing basically at random. You notice it's not quite random, like the flesh tones are kind of in the reddish range. The background is somewhere in the neutral range. As long as I have some basic direction with color in mind in terms of a family of color I'm going to use in the light, which I've already explained is like cooler colors because it's a cold light, and a family of colors I'm going to use in the shadows, which in this case is warmer colors, I can kind of just go a little crazy with those colors. I don't need to feel like I have to pick the right color. Now here's a little secret, and I learned this from, I think it was Jeff Watts who said it, a great painting instructor, runs his own atelier. Jeff Watts said that a lot of students come up to him and ask, how do you paint flesh tones? And his response is, how do you not paint flesh tones? Any color is a flesh tone. Go ahead and pick a color in your color wheel, boom, flesh tone, done. Every color is a flesh tone. The problem is not how to paint flesh tone. The problem is how do you paint the planes of the head? How do you draw good shapes? How do you control your values? That's the problem. If you are ever critiquing your own work and you think you're having a color problem, I'm willing to bet that it is either a drawing problem or a value problem. Anyway, what I'm doing here is I'm drawing, but with a big shape of a brush stroke, big shape of value, I should say. And I'm bringing in all the same stuff, all the same shapes that I would or could draw with a pencil, but I'm just doing it with value here. So I'm kind of skipping a step. I'm skipping the line drawing step, which brings a different result, because when you work with these big patchy brush strokes, the painting starts feeling more painterly. Not to say that you can't achieve a painterly look when you do a line drawing, but when you do a line drawing, it's very easy to become rigid about it and get stuck to it or overly precious about it. Whereas now, there's nothing quote unquote good about what's on the canvas now. I feel very free to paint right over it. And that's how I'll build my painting. I'll use that mindset of revision the whole way. Just kind of resizing the canvas a bit. I want to get a little bit more of the back of her head. Showing the cranium is very important. I talked about this in the drawing section, where a lot of people will actually misdraw the cranium and not give it enough room. I even think in composition, not cutting off the head at the cranium is an important thing. There's just something really unflattering about a cut off cranium. Probably, again, something to do with the fact that the brain fits in there. And so you notice what I'm doing. I've already got some color relationships built up in the painting, and just in terms of basic families, cooler lights, warmer shadows. And when it comes to the exact color I'm picking, I mean, just look at the sketch here. I'm not thinking of that way. I'm just thinking about a broad general relationship. Again, cooler lights, warmer shadows. As long as I'm maintaining that for the most part, I mean, I can even break that rule, but as long as I'm maintaining that, it will allow the color to feel like it's following a structure. Just like it's important for the head drawing to have structure. I mean, that's of critical importance if you want to paint representationally. You have to have your drawing be structured. The colors can be less structured. The old cliche is true. If your value in drawing is good, your color can almost do anything. But in order for your color to feel like it has a structure, what I recommend is just looking into adhering to basic family relationships. Cold light, warm shadows in this case. That can flip on its head depending on the light source. This, unfortunately, is not the class to get into that. That's its own 10-hour course. In fact, I teach an 8-week class at CGMA about light and color. And I also plan to do more classes like this about light and color. I'll give you some general pointers here, but in terms of every color I'm picking, the thing that you can trust me on is that I'm barely even looking at the colors I'm picking. In fact, sometimes I'll just pick a color that I know is way too strong, and I'll just mix it in with my tablet pressure, right? Like every brush I'm using here is responding to tablet pressure. So sometimes I'll pick a color that's way off, but I can mix the color on the canvas. Where the halftone is, so you see where all those lights are, right? Look at the cheek right now. So where the cheek is, you see where the cheek starts rolling into shadow? We get a halftone there, right? You notice I'm pumping some red into that halftone. There's something that halftones do. Because the halftone is turning away from the light, what can happen there is the bully effect of the light. Remember a minute ago I described the light as a kind of bully? The bully effect can be diminished a little bit in halftone. So the halftone, in this case, is getting less of that strong blue from the light, that strong coldness from the light. So I can reveal a little bit more flesh color in the light through the halftone. This is particularly helpful in this case because the temperature of the light and shadow colors are so dramatically different. The halftone is kind of my bridge. Not only is it a bridge from light to shadow values, I'm using it as a bridge to light from light and shadow colors as well. So, those halftones can really make a difference. Now, when it comes to refining your sensibilities about this stuff, it just takes practice. No course or professor or anything is going to just give you a magic pill that makes you able to paint in color. It took me, and I still study a lot, but I spent years in the life drawing classroom, with live models in front of me with different lighting sources on them. And I would paint in oils from life. And I would just do sketches like this. Like this sketch in real time, you're seeing it sped up a little bit. In real time, it took me about 30 to 40 minutes. And I feel like that's kind of what I would do from life. Although with oil paint, it takes a little longer because you got to mix your colors on the palette and stuff. I'd spend about 2 to 3 hours on any given oil sketch on a life drawing night. Digital, again, you can move a bit quicker, but it's the same kind of mentality where I'm not here to make this a perfect representation of the photo. I'm not even trying to copy my painting on the right. I'm just showing you how I would approach painting this way. And when I say painting this way, what I'm basically doing, or at least what I think I'm doing, is I'm taking all the fundamentals we learned in Chapter 1 and applying them in a more artistic way and less of a technical way. I said this in the intro of this very lesson, of this very course, that Chapter 1 is a more technical understanding, Chapter 2 is a more artistic understanding. So you can see that with a lot of the artistic stuff, at least for me, my own personal bias, you kind of have to be willing to throw out technical perfection. And I got to be careful here. This is not to say that your painterly paintings can't be technical. You have to have a degree of technical proficiency, but I've always looked at technical proficiency as something where you have to build those skills in order to earn the right to throw them away. So what I'm doing is I'm editing this painting not based on a decision to show the viewer every plane. Like in this painting, I don't care to show the viewer where the mandible is. Now, I know where the mandible is, and I can point to it. If you were to audit me, I'd say, if you were to come up to me and say, hey, where's the mandible? I would say, it's right there. I know it's there, but I don't have to announce that knowledge to the viewer. Now, in Chapter 1, you very much do have to announce that knowledge because that's how you gain technical proficiency. Then in painting like this, you kind of put it in the back of your brain, so you're never forgetting about it, but you're able to focus on other things. Things like that wild array of color I just put down and how that relates to the overall color design of the picture. How these colors resonate emotionally. I care much less about the mandible than I do about the emotional quality of a painting. So for me, and if I can point out one of my own flaws with art, it's that I sometimes catch myself going too far on the emotional side, where I'll actually draw badly. And, even in this sketch, I'm like, okay, I have to fix a few things, tweak proportions, make sure things aren't getting distorted. But the structure's there, so I can always tweak it. If you use like Photoshop's Liquify tool, that's all fair game. If this were an oil painting, I would be too far I'd have to actually scrape out paint, which I have done on oil paintings, studio paintings. I remember once I was working on a commission. It was like a 4-foot high canvas, And like hours and hours in, I woke up one morning and just scraped away half the person's face because I had elongated the cheekbones too much, and it stretched the face like a gummy face or something. And I just repainted it. The structure above the cheekbones was good, but not below. So these are things that you kind of have to check for. Now, Photoshop or digital media makes this much more painless. You can just hop into the Liquify tool or any kind of warp tool you might have in your software and adjust things accordingly. And though that's fine to do, so long as your structure is there, you can make little tweaks like that. Now, past a certain point, you probably can't fix some things. Some things will just need a redraw. That's inevitable. But that's the other reason I like working in a painterly style like this. I feel like I can modify things at almost any point. Here I'm starting to ratchet down on exactly the contours of these shapes of light, the cheekbone in this case. Flipping the canvas will help you gauge your drawing. You'll point out, you'll notice little inconsistencies and structural errors that you might want to fix. So I haven't done it here, shame on me, but I usually flip my canvas quite often. I'll even flip it upside down sometimes just to look at the patterns of shapes that I'm making, although that's more of a compositional thing. But little tweaks to shape whenever I'm doing this in a little sketch study like this, I know I'm almost finished. Again, I'm not trying to make this a finished painting. In fact, the only thing that differentiates a sketch like this from a finished painting is the exactness of the shape, honing the shape to be exactly what you want. Whereas with a sketch, I'll often be satisfied with an approximation, like something that is certainly moving in a good direction, but the edges aren't quite fully sanded down yet. What I will not sacrifice in a sketch is value control and structure. Those you can't, it's not like when I sketch, I'm like, oh, I don't have to have structure. No, that can never go away. That's why when you look at an artist you like, a professional artist, their sketches still look good because they're still prioritizing structure. And their finished paintings will still have structure, as well as every other little thing being refined according to their taste. Like even in this, I'm doing a little sketch study here. If you compare the painting I'm doing right now to my own painting just to the right of it, the painting to the right of it, which took me probably 3 hours, whereas this one's about 30 minutes. In the 3-hour one, I didn't change the brushwork. It's not like I rendered things more, but I became more exact with the shapes. And I don't know if you've noticed this, but if I'm looking at the one on the right, if I'm being honest here, there's a certain poise to her. There's a element of more consciousness in the one on the right than the one on the left. And it has nothing to do with the structure. There's just something about all the shapes, all the edges, all the little color harmonies coming together in a way that looks very considered. Thinking about three-dimensional structure and anatomy, but also marrying that with two-dimensional shape design. Then on top of that, also making sure that all those little rhythms are doing exactly what you want them to do. That is where I will spend a long time on my finished work. It has nothing to do, for me, it doesn't have anything to do with the brushwork or the rendering or the detail. I'll still stay loose. If I were to work on this for another 2 hours, it would still look like this. I mean, stylistically speaking. It's just the little things, little shape designs, little edge control things. That's what I'd refine. And, in a sketch, I don't really think you should worry about that too much. Again, the fine line here is that your structure can't go away. It has to have good structure in order for me to consider it a successful study, whatever that's worth. But don't burden yourself in your studies with having to finish everything. Be willing to drop that painting and move on once it's past a certain point. And I'm arriving at that point very soon. One thing I just wanted to add about the color. Overall, you notice I'm following the scheme that I laid out for you in the beginning of this section, where the lights are dominated with cooler color choices versus the shadows, which are dominated by warmer color choices. But within let's look at the shadows now. Within those shadows, there are still elements of cooler color mixing in there. If you look at the side of, right where the zygomatic bone is, where it recedes back to the ear, there's some blue swatches there. Even in the jaw, there's some cooler tones there in the jaw, which are also present on my painting on the right. Those are nice because they kind of link the shadows with the light. So when I say I'm using cooler colors in the light, warmer colors in the shadow in this, it's not categorically every color has to be cool in the light and every color has to be warm in the shadow. In fact, just the opposite. I kind of like to play this little game where I link them, where I have cooler warms in the shadow in this case, and maybe even some warmer cools in the light. If you look at her chin, that's in light. See, there's even little elements of yellow in there and orange in there. That's a little game I'm playing where I'm trying to have all the colors exist everywhere, just in different levels of saturation, different strengths of temperature, you might say. That's how I can kind of keep palettes cohesive while still using a lot of color. Anyway, I think I've taken this study about as far as I want to take it. And there we go, a complete sketch study. I think one good way to evaluate this, as always, is to flip it to grayscale. Make sure your lights are separating from your shadows on a value level. Make sure that all your lights are lighter than your shadows and all your shadows are darker than your lights. You can also check for rhythms, like remember how the nose had that circular connection to the chin? You notice that that rhythm is there. And I know I didn't talk about that while I was painting, but I was thinking about it and I'm just mentioning it now. Make sure that that is there. Looking at the brow, make sure like there is a solid plane change, right in here that's separating the side of the box from the front of the box. Here's that brow line we looked at, underneath which digs into the eye sockets. There is evidence here of the zygomatic bone retreating to the ear, which would be somewhere here. It's hidden in this view by the hair. Remember, like the stair-steppy part of the lower part of the head. Remember this? Just check for these little rhythmical elements. You can trace the cheekbones, making sure they're making that nice funnel shape coming down. These are all things that I do just mentally while I paint, but you can literally use them to audit yourself at the end of any sketch to evaluate what you hung on to versus what you accidentally let slip. It's a great addition you can do after you sketch. And I recommend giving your sketches a bit of time, walk away from them for a bit, then come back and use this method of evaluation. Don't do it right away. Oftentimes we see things fresh once some time has gone by. And once some time went by on this one, I noticed I had given her an unintentional little goatee right there. It's actually part of the background, but let's not do that. Let's give her a clean silhouette, a little bit more like I did on the painting on the right. No unintentional facial hair, even in a sketch. I feel like that's better. Okay, let's roll right into another painting.